Hi friends, welcome to First Studies YouTube channel. This is part 1 in PySpark real-time scenarios playlist. From this video, I am going to start a new playlist called PySpark real-time scenarios. In this video, we are going to discuss about different kind of real-time scenarios which can be solved using a PySpark coding. It can be in the Databricks, it can be in the Synapse, right? So usually this is PySpark code we will write inside the Synapse notebooks or Databricks notebooks. So when you performing the data transformation, you may need a set of functions or libraries which are available in the PySpark to do your transformations. So we will pick some different use cases and we will try to implement them in this playlist videos. Don't worry, you may be wondering at this moment there is no PySpark playlist yet in my channel. Directly we are starting PySpark real-time scenarios, right? Even though you don't know much idea about the PySpark, if you know a basic coding programming understanding of the Python, then you can follow along this playlist as well. Still, I will be creating a PySpark normal playlist also which explain the different concepts in the PySpark in our upcoming days. Okay. So meanwhile, even though you don't know anything in the PySpark, you can follow along these videos as well because I will be explaining slowly with detailed steps. Okay. So stay tuned for the PySpark playlist as well in the future. So let's try to understand the scenario, first scenario, what we are trying to achieve here. So if you closely observe this here, this is a JSON, right? So let's assume if this JSON data is available inside a column of the data frame. Now, if you closely observe, this name is a key and for this key, Mahir Basha is a value, but this value contains a double quote in middle. So we need to use the PySpark in such a way that we can remove this double quote from this JSON string. So let's try to understand how to do that. You cannot directly replace this double quote. Why? Because there are so many double quotes in the JSON string. If you directly replace it, then all the double quotes will be removed, right? So we have to delicately handle this scenario. So let's try to explain this with a practical implementation. Let me go to browser here. So this is my Azure Databricks workspace, and here let me navigate to the different tab where I have already opened my Azure Databricks workspace. As I said before as well, this code whatever I am going to implement now, you can use it in the Synapse notebooks as well. Why? Because both are work executes on a Spark only, right? It can be Databricks, it can be Synapse notebook. Both these notebooks will actually run on a Spark, and PySpark is one of the API or the library which is available to communicate with the Spark. Okay. So now let me try to go to workspace here and let me go to users and under my username. So let me try to create a new folder here first and let me name this folder name as like maybe PySpark scenarios. Okay, PySpark scenarios. So this is the name of the folder and all the files I will try to, or all the notebooks I will try to keep inside this folder only. So now let's try to create a new notebook here and let me name like JSON string example. Okay, and Python is a default language and this is the cluster which I want to attach with my PySpark Databricks notebook. So now this is the notebook which I just created and the default language is Python and the cluster is already attached. So as I said before, let's assume you have a JSON string which I have shown in the presentation something like this. So let me do this. So I have opened a Visual Studio and here I copied this. So let me copy this line here and then let me go to Databricks notebook. So let's try to create a data frame by our own. So to create a data frame, let's try to create a data variable and to the data variable I am passing a list of tuples. So each tuple here is nothing but like a one row. So tuple or list are nothing but like a collection types, right? They will hold the collection of the items. So if you don't know what is list and tuple, please watch my Python playlist. And here let's assume I have like ID 1 in the first row and then second value is maybe like ABCD. Okay, and then let's try to add second row as well. In the second row I have a the JSON string which I was trying to hold as a string, right, which I was trying to explain in this example, right. So let's try to use this JSON string as value in the second row. So for that what I am doing, so let me try to create a variable called JSON string and I am using three quotes here. If you closely observe, when you use triple quote, it is nothing but like a it is nothing but like a multi-line commenting, right? So multi-line strings will be having these triple quotes actually. So all this I have explained in my Python playlist. So you need to watch that. So between these three quotes, whatever the content you have, that all will become actually like a string. So if it is not making sense at this moment, let me show you this practically. So let me remove this data variable here, and here let me simply try to print JSON string whatever I just now created. Let me hit shift enter to execute this cell. See, I got that JSON string whatever I have used inside the triple quotes, right? So this triple quotes denotation will help you to denote like multi-lines string. So if your string having multi-lines, you can use it. So I am using that syntax here. Why? Because I already have one double quote in middle. Or simply what I can do, I can use a single quote also. And between the single quotes, I can use my JSON string. So why I am using a single quote here? Why? Because inside this JSON string, I already have a double quotes. If I directly use a double quotes, then I have to escape all this, or else it will not be readable as a string from the system. So this is fine. Now let's try to use a data variable, and to the data variable first row is maybe let's assume here we will use a correct JSON only. So let's try to use a correct JSON here, and let me do one thing. Let me copy this entire thing here once again, and in the first row let's try to use the JSON here. ID equals to 1 and maybe name equals to Wafa. Let's try to use name as Wafa, and city equals to Hyderabad. And let me do one thing. This is ID1, right? So let me take this as ID2, and here now let me try to use this JSON variable as a second column value for the data variable. Okay, so now let's try to use create another variable called columns, and here I am going to define columns for my data frame which I am going to create. So let's try to create two columns, column 1 and then column 2. So column 1 will contain this data 1 and 2. Column 2 will contain this JSON string whatever you are seeing here, this one, and also in the second row it will contain this JSON string. Why? Because this variable I am using as a value here. If this is not making sense at this moment, let me try to show you this practically. So when I use Spark, on the Spark dot, I am pressing Control space to get the intelligence create data frame. To this create data frame function, I am passing this data list which contains tuples of the rows, and then I am also passing this columns variable that is going to define the columns for these rows, and I am going to saving this back into a variable called df. Why? Because this code is going to give you back a data frame, and that data frame I am storing into this variable. So once the data frame is available, you can use a display function and then pass your data frame to visualize it. So let me hit shift enter to execute this cell now, and let's see whether we will get our data properly shown in the below result or not. We can see column 1 contains ID1, and this is the JSON string what we have. It looks like a JSON, but it is actually string only, right? And why? Because we kept everything in a single quotes, you can say. And similarly this is also a string only, but the first row JSON is fine, but in the second row this is where we have a concern. So somehow we want to make sure to remove this double quote from this name field. So that is what we want to achieve. So let's try to see how to achieve it. So for our simplicity, what I am going to do, so let's not try to have a two rows. Let me remove this, and let me try to have only one row. That is enough for us. Okay, and here now let me re-execute this entire code, and if you see I got like this is the row. Okay, and here I have this JSON, and in this I want to remove this double quote. Now closely observe what I am going to do to remove that. So here what I am going to do, firstly to make sure to to remove only this double quote, what I will be doing, I will be trying to split this JSON into array. Okay, so this entire thing is a string, right? Actually I am going to use a split function to split this string into array actually, and I am going to split based on this name property. Why? Because let's assume in the real time always the name property values are going to contain this incorrect data, and we have to overcome it. So split function, if you don't know how what it will do, it will actually split any given string with the separator whatever you will give, and store all that items as a array. So to show you that practically, let me go to Visual Studio, and here, right, so let's assume I have string 1, s1 is my string, and here inside this string 1 let's assume I have a, then maybe pipe b, then maybe, so this is my string, let's assume. Now if I do on the s1, if I do this split, and to the split function if I specify split based upon this pipe symbol, what it is going to do, from this string wherever you see the pipe symbol, it is going to split that, and the items, whatever the values you have between that pipe symbol, it will try to take them as each value and store it into a list. Let me practically show you this. So whatever the split function is going to return, let's try to print this simply here. And now let me save these changes, and now if I execute this Python code, you see I got a comma b comma c. So I got a list which contains 3 items. First item is a, second item is b, third item is c. How it is coming? Why? Because based upon this separator value, it splitted the string, and all the splits it stored as a separate items into a array. So that's what split will do. The same thing here also, what I am going to do, I want to split this JSON string by specifying from here to here as a separator. You will make sense why I will be doing this in a couple of minutes. So on a df data frame, let's try to create a new value. So in the on the data frame we have 2 columns already. To create a new column, we have to use this with column. You can click this control space button to get the intelligence. This new column function is going to create a new column. So let me try to create a new column called column 3, and for this column whatever the value you want to get, that value you have to use it as a second parameter. So this second value what I want is, I am going to use a split function, and to the split function I am going to supply the column. Which column I am going to supply this column to, and from this column to whatever the data you are getting, so you need to keep this column name in the double quotes, whatever the data you are getting from this column to, that data I want to split based on this value. So wherever you see this entire thing, that's where you break that string and take the items or the partitions or the separate parts into the separate items. So I will practically show you that what it will return. So I am splitting this on based of this, right? So now let's try to save this back into a data frame called df again, and here below let's try to display my data frame. So let me remove this display statement here, and let me hit shift enter to execute this. So there is a syntax error, it's saying split is not defined. Why? Because this split function is actually part of a library called PySpark.sql.function. So let me try to import all the modules from that PySpark.sql.functions. So I am pressing control space always to get the notification, to get the intelligence. Okay, import star. So from this library, all the modules, star means all the modules I am importing. So even this split is part of one of this part of this library only. So now if I execute this, it should work. Let me hit shift enter to execute this cell. Now if you closely observe the column 3, what it happened, it tried to create a array, and in the array if you see, in the array I have 2 items. In the first item I have id 2 and then comma, if you see, from here to here open floor bracket to here, and then I splitted based on this name, and from here to here I splitted this, right? So before this everything is one item, and after this everything is another item. So that's what we got it here, right? Now in the second item which is at index 1, this is where we have this extra double quote, that is what we want to remove it. So how to remove it? So to remove it, what we can do is, we can take this item with the index 1, and then we can try to split once again this string we can split once again based upon this double quote as a first occurrence. I will show you that practically. So now till here it is clear, right? So let's try to create a 3 columns here. We are creating a column 3 by splitting. From this split, take the 0th index value, that means this value, let's try take it as a column 3, and then dot another with column. Let me try to use another with column, and whenever you are trying to write your code in a separate line, try to use this slash here, because the same line I am going to continue, right? But I am continuing in a different row. So use this slashes whenever you have a line break in the Python. And then here let's try to create another column called column 4, and in this column 4 I want to have this value whatever I used for the split, right? So this name column, so this is what I want to keep as a value in the column 4. So why I am doing this, and to do that, because it is a static value, you need to use this lit function. That means lit means literal, and to this lit function pass your static value. So why I am keeping this thing in a column 3, you will make sense in a just a bit. What I am going to do, I am going to break this entire thing into 3 parts. First part is from here to here, and second part is like this, the separator, and the third part whatever we have here, from that part we will be removing this, and then finally combining all the 3 parts. So that's why every part we are keeping into a separate column. Column 3 now going to hold this first part, and then column 4 is going to hold this second this separator part, and then in the column 5 I will be holding this entire thing, that means this entire thing, and then I will try to see how I can replace this double quote, and then finally combine all those 3 columns. So let me try to add slash, and then again with column, another column I am going to add, and this time this column name I am going to name it like column 5, and in the column 5 the same split whatever I am doing it here, let's try to split the same thing, and then here let's try to take the first index, that means this value as a column 5. If I execute this, now you will make sense of it. Let me hit shift enter to execute this entire code. Now if you see, column 2 contains our JSON string, and in the column 3 I have from here to here this portion, and in the column 4 I have from here to here this portion, okay, which used as a separator to split that string, and then in the column 5 I have from here to here this portion. So this is clear, right? So once we get this column 5, now what we have to do, we have to remove this double quote here whatever you are seeing here, and then finally combine these 3 column values into a single value so that we can get our string properly. So let me try to do this. So here what I am going to do, let's try to use on top of data frame, let's try to use this with column function again, and I am going to modify the existing column value also, you have to use the with column function only. So I am going to modify the existing column called column 5, and how I am going to modify, I am going to take this entire string now, and I am going to split this entire string into 2 parts. If I directly split this based upon this double quote, right, what will happen, it will create multiple splits. From here to here one item, and from here to here another item, and this is third item, this is fourth item. Why? Because we have so many double quotes. Let me practically show you that what I mean to say. So let me use a split function, and to the split function I am supplying my column 5, and then I am supplying my separator. My separator I am supplying as a double quote. So this is what I did it. Now if I execute this code, what will happen? Closely observe. So I am storing the data frame back into a DF and displaying the data frame. Let me hit shift enter. Now if you closely observe this column 5, what happened? It created so many items as an array. Mahir, Basha. Why? Because there are so many single quotes. Let me do one thing. Let me save this data as a column 6 so that we can check column 5 and column 6 values side by side. Let me hit shift enter now. And now if you see, in the column 5 we have data like this, and we are trying to split based on this double column. Then what happened, wherever we have the double quote, right, it splitted that items and stored as a multiple items into array. We don't want that. What I want is, I want to split this entire string as 2 parts only. That means from this double quotes, whatever you have left side as a first part and remaining as a second part. How to do that? To do that, if you know, this split function has a third parameter as well. So right now to the split function we have supplied 2 parameters. First parameter as a column, second parameter as a separator. The third parameter will be number of splits you want. You can supply this information as well. So when I supply number of parameters as a 2, number of splits as a true, that means 2, that means what will happen? It will try to take the first occurrence of the separator, that means double quote, and it will break the string into 2 parts, and it won't further proceed to break the splits. Why? Because we specified maximum splits are going to be 2 only. That means maximum items in an array should be 2 only. So if I do that, this column 6 value is going to contain only 2 parts. First part will be Mahir and second part will be from Basha to till last. Let me execute this by hitting the shift enter and show you that practically. Now if I closely observe this column 6, I got only 2 parts, Mahir and the second part will be Bhasha and all this. Now if you see in the both the items, this double quote whatever we have, it is not there. Why? Because based on the double quote only we splitted that string. Now what I will be doing, I will be combining these two items whatever you are seeing here inside the array item as a string. To do that we have to use some function called concat ws. So let me practically show you that as well. So now on top of this def, let's use the with column once again, and let's try to modify the column 6 itself. Now let's try to modify column 6, and what I want in the column split, I am going to use concat underscore ws function. Okay, so if I press control space, I will see the intelligence as well. So what this function will do, it will try to take the array items and it is going to concatenate all these items as a string. So when you are going to concatenate the multiple items as a single string, you need to supply based upon what specific value I have to concat. For example, if I use as a first parameter here, if I use a pipe symbol, and then as a second parameter, if I use my column which is column 6, what will happen? Closely observe. So column 6, right? COL6, and let me save this entire thing back into data frame called df and then display the data frame. Now if I hit shift enter, what will happen? See, it concatenated everything based on this pipe symbol. Why? Because I specified concatenate the items from the array with this pipe symbol. So to avoid that, what I can do, I can simply use a empty string here and then I will ask to concatenate. Let me do one thing. Let me create this one also as a separate column like column 7 from the column 6, so that you will make more sense of it. Now let me hit this shift enter button to execute this code executed. Now if I see, I need to see this column 7, right? If you see here column 7, see in the column 6 I got these two items. Now I am combined both these items as a single string, and when I am combining is using this concat, I am using a empty string. That is the reason nothing is there. So now if you closely observe, in the column 3 I have this portion. From the column 2, if you compare from here to here, I have in the column 3, and then from here to here, from here to here, right, I have in the column 4, and then this remaining portion by removing the double quote I have in the column 7. So if I combine column 3, column 4 and column 7 values, then I am going to get my JSON back, which is removed with this double quote in middle of the value. So let me try to do that. So let me try to create on top of data frame, let me try to use this with column function once again, and let's try to create a new column called column 8, and to this new column what I am going to do, I am going to use this concatenate function, and I am going to concatenate all these three column values. Column 3 concatenate column of column 3, then I am going to concatenate column 3, then I am going to concatenate this column 4 value, col 4, then I am going to concatenate column 4, then finally column 7, right? So let me scroll and see that what is the column name, column 7. Okay, so let me try to use that also here. So I am going to concatenate all these columns and I am going to list them as a column 8, and whatever the data frame it returns, let me save it back into a data frame called df and then finally display the data frame. So let me hit shift enter here now to execute this, and now if you see the column 8, I should have got the data correctly by removing the double quote which is available in middle of my JSON property value. See, now we got it. To see this JSON and the output JSON side by side, let me do one thing. Let me on top of this, let me try to use this select function that allows you to select the columns, like how SQL, in the SQL you have a select, right, to take the specific columns. So to this select function I am going to specify only column 2 and column 8 to return. So column 8 to return, so that I can compare both the values, and whatever the selected output, save it into a data frame and then display it. Let me hit shift enter to execute this code. Now if you closely observe both this code which are available side by side, you can clearly see this is the JSON which has a name property with value double quotes in it, and then this is the JSON string which I generated now with all this code that removed the double quote from this value, right? So this is the code I did it. So if you closely observe what I did it, I simply used this with column functions multiple time to create or generate multiple columns. So as a sudoku, if I want to say what I did, this entire string I have splitted firstly based upon this separator. Why? Because name is the property which always going to hold a value with the double quotes. So I splitted it. Once I splitted it, I tried to save this portion into one column and this portion into another column and the remaining portion into another column. And then from this remaining portion, I performed split again based upon this double quote, and I made sure to split only two splits so that I can use this concatenate ws function to combine that as a single string and then finally combine all the columns. So that is what I did it. So I hope you got an idea about this logic implementation, whatever I did it. I am going to save this, store this code also, like in the video description I will keep this code also. You can paste this code into your video and you can test as well. So let's go back to presentation. I think that's it in this video. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon to get the notification whenever I do videos. Thank you so much.